Boisai, let's do it. A little schwach today, but let's make this happen. All right. So business with non-kosher food. Is it treif to do business with treif? Let's understand. Now, there's a Mishnah in Shvias Perik Zayin Mishnah Gimel that says, "Ein oisin schayra loy benevela loy betreifus loy b'shkatzim loy b'ramazim." You can't do business with any of these treif stuff, any of this non-kosher food. Now, the next Mishnah then goes on to say that if you are a animal trapper or a hunter and you get yourself a non-kosher animal, you could go and sell it. So what's going on? So you can't do business with it, but if you happen to get one, you're allowed to sell it. That's the heter that we call in this damnu. It happened to come your way. If it happened to come your way, that's fine. Now, it's actually really a pasuk, because the pasuk says you sell the nevela to the guy. So it's really a pasuk that when you get a nevela, you could sell it to a guy. So doing business is a problem. This damnu would be allowed. If it happens to come in your ownership, you could sell it. Now the Shulchan Aruch brings this down in Simin Kuf Yud Zayin of Yeridea, that anything which is miyuchid lachila, it's meant to be eaten, even if it's not something that's also like something like basar v'chalav or chametz on Pesach, we know that's asar b'hana. You're obviously not allowed to sell it. But even things which aren't asar b'hana, if they're miyuchid lachila, you cannot do business with it. I think a lot of people do not know this isser. There's an isser to do business with things that are asar b'hana. The Shulchan Aruch qualifies. This only applies to items which are asar midaraisa. If it's something that's asar midarabanan, you're allowed to do business with it. Something that's asar midaraisa, you cannot do business with it. Okay. Is this a din daraisa or is it a din darabanan? So there's a Gemara in Pesachim Chav Gimel Amud Aleph, which is mashma that it's a din daraisa. Why? Because the Gemara in Pesachim says that in a case of nizdamnu, that is allowed because the pasuk says shochem you, meaning with the Gemara in Pesachim darshans a pasuk to be matter the case of when it comes your way, which implies we're dealing with a din daraisa, because you don't have a pasuk come to be matter something that's really just a din darabanan. Okay, so what do the Rishonim hold? Do they all agree to that? That's pshat in the Gemaras, so the Rashba, the Mukha Yosef, the Rosh, and Tosfos all say it's a din daraisa. There's a very strange Nidin Yehuda, and Nidin Yehuda says all the Rishonim say this is a din darabanan. Now the Chassam Sofer already says that the Nidin Yehuda is tzarachin. I don't know how he could say it's a din darabanan when we have many Rishonim saying it's a din daraisa. In fact, most of the Rishonim saying it's a din daraisa. The Ma'aseh Chacham Adam says all poskim hold that it's daraisa. And the Aruch HaShulchan says Roiv poskim say it's daraisa. So different people have different languages, but Lamaisa, the understood and accepted idea is not doing business with non-kosher food is a din deraisa. Okay. Now the Taz says the reason behind this isser is that you won't come to eat it. Listen, if you're doing business with non-kosher food, you might come to eat it. Don't do business with non-kosher food, so you don't come to eat it. That is interesting. It's a tam for din deraisa. The Chassam Sofer says that this tam will not come to create any kulas. It won't be, let's say, I own it and it's the other side of the world, it's okay. No, it will only come to create chumras. And therefore, for example, the Chassam Sofer says one is not allowed to be a chef in a non-kosher restaurant, in a treif restaurant, because even though you're not the owner and you're not doing business with it, but the issue of you may come to eat it still applies, and therefore that would not be allowed. Not everybody agrees to this Chassam Sofer. Fine. So we discussed there's this isser of doing business. Let's discuss a little bit further. There's a bunch of exceptions. One exception is there's no isser of doing business with chelav. We learned that out from a pasuk. There's no isser in chelav. Next, the isser only applies to foods which are asur midaraisa. We already brought that up. Number 3, the isser only applies for isser achila. You're allowed to do business with something that is a different type of isser. I don't know, shatnez, for example. As long as you have no chashash that it will end up in a Jew's hands, you could do business with something which is asr but not asr b'achila. And the fourth heter I want to discuss is that this only applies if one actively and purposely purchased the non-kosher food. If somebody happened to receive the non-kosher food and this damnu, it just happened to come his way, then one would be allowed to sell it. Now let's go through these exceptions. The first exception of chilav. It's an old shayla. Could somebody be in the business of selling the hind quarter, the back of the cow, of kosher animals? The Neidim Yehuda says, yeah. Why? Let's think of it. What's the issues? The issues is there's chilav there. Chilav you're allowed to sell. There's git nasha. Git nasha isn't food. It's like dental floss. It's not food. And there's those meats around the chilav, which the minhag of the Ashkenazim is not to eat. That's just a minhag. And therefore, it's definitely not istaresa, and therefore one could be in the business of selling hindquarters. Let's go to the second one, istaresa. It only applies to istaresa. This is very helpful because most non-kosher items which aren't meat are usually asim d'Rabbanan. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure you can find plenty of examples where there's the suri d'Oraisa, but most of the time it's asim d'Rabbanan, these non-meat items, and therefore those would be allowed to do business with. There's a shmua, there's a saying that comes from Moshe Feinstein that you're allowed to look at the ingredients, and if you don't see any asad d'oraisa stuff in the ingredients, you're allowed to do business with it. Did Moshe say it? I can't tell you that I know for sure he did, but that's the shmua, and lamaisa, it makes sense. The fourth exception is that the isser only applies to things which are miyuchad la'achila. So let's think about this, for example. Can one own a pet store? So the answer is yes, because even though those are non-kosher animals that he's selling, he's not selling those animals to eat. He's selling it as a pet. So think about it. It becomes very interesting. Before I actually jump into that, could somebody sell a horse? Yes! Horses are generally sold to be, to ride and whatever. The eating them might just be a side point, but that's not what they're generally sold for. So it's very interesting. Somebody could sell non-kosher fish in a fish tank at a pet store, but one cannot sell non-kosher food at a fish store. Non-kosher fish at a fish store. Okay, interesting. Now, can one buy a non-kosher animal that has some of its uses for achila and some of its uses for other purposes, and he's buying it for other purposes? So the Maisa Tosfos is Mekel, the Rashba is Machmer, the Shach is Mekel like Tosfos. So therefore, if you would want to buy this non-kosher, this nevela, because you're doing it for leather. Some people buy the nevela for leather, for making leather. Some buy it for food. He's buying it, he's planning on I'm starting off that he's only using it for leather, and he's not using it for the food. That would be allowed. Dog food. Can one buy dog food, or can one sell dog food in his supermarket? So what is dog food? Usually it's meat, it's nevela. Now sometimes you have to be careful actually. Dog food sometimes has milk in it, and then it gets into a whole shayla of basar b'chalav and basar b'chalav being asur b'hana. So be careful. Don't just buy dog food with check if it has any milk ingredients. If it has milk ingredients, stay away. If it's basar b'chalav, it's asur b'hana, and even if you bought it for your own dog, you might have to throw it out. Now, the Maisa, can the Jewish-owned supermarkets sell dog food which is not basar b'chalav? They're buying the nevela and selling the nevela. So Moshe is matter because he says that doesn't have a din food. Even if they tell you that it's fit for human consumption, at the end of the day, it's not designed for human food. What about cat food? They say that apparently poor people sometimes eat cat food. So can you sell cat food? So once again, yes, you could sell cat food because we don't view that as human food. Even though it might be possible for a human to eat it, we don't view it as a human food, and therefore that would be allowed. Now, the Piskei Tshuva brings the base hill that you can't sell fruit and lettuce with bugs. The Pri Megadim as well says you can't sell it because you're selling shkatzim. Right? That was one of the things listed in the Mishnah, shkatzim v'ramazim, right? If you're selling the bugs, or you're selling the fruit, and the lettuce and has bugs in it, it's a problem. However, the Pri Chadish allows it. Why? Because you're not selling the bugs, you're selling the fruit. Now, let's take a little bit of a deep dive into this. On one hand, when they're weighing that lettuce, the weight of weighing that fruit, the weight of the bugs are included in the weight that's being purchased. So the chayra, you're buying and selling the bugs. However, on the other hand, if you think about it, bug-free produce is more expensive. So the bugs are making it cheaper. So you can't tell me that he's selling the bugs when the bugs are actually taken away from the price. The mice of the Welt is Mekel and relies on this. And the Shalom Yeshiv is Mekel as well for a little bit of a different reason. It's like this dam. Meaning the store was never intended to buy the bugs. The store would prefer it if the bugs weren't there, so therefore it's not considered doing business with bugs. As we see in the Torah, if one animal becomes a nevela, you can sell it to a guy. Why? Because the Torah isn't saying that you have to lose money. The Torah is just saying, don't do business with non-kosher. But you get it, you could sell it. So therefore, if somebody inherits non-kosher, or he buys it by mistake, he could sell what he inherited, or he could go back to the store, by mistake bought Treif. He could go back to the store and return it and get his money back. That would not be a problem. Now, what if somebody bought Treif, he's an Amazon seller, he got a good deal, he bought Treif to sell for a profit. And right now, let's say he's listening to the shiur right now, and he's saying to himself, uh-oh, I didn't know about this isser. Now, could that guy who just said, uh-oh, could he sell it? He bought it not knowing that there was an isser. Could he go and sell it now? So it kind of depends. Let's think about it. What's the isser? Is the isser buying? Is the isser selling the non-kosher items? Or is it doing both, buying and selling? So it's actually not very clear. However, one thing that we certainly could say is he could definitely sell it for the price that he paid for it. Why? Because once again, the whole isser is don't do business, don't make money on selling non-kosher foods. But we see from this damnu, if it happens to come your way, you're allowed to sell it, that there's no problem. You don't need to lose money. You're just not supposed to make money. So therefore, one could sell it for their purchase price. So, it's an interesting question. Can you go? This guy, he found the deal on this treif meat. Let's say he found the deal, and on these frog legs, he found the deal on frog legs, and he was going to sell it at a big profit. Now he's going to go to the supplier that he was going to go to the store, the restaurant he was planning on selling it out to, and he tells them, "Listen, I'm going to sell it to you at a crazy low price. Usually the price would be $50,000 for this, this large quantity. I'll sell it to you for $25,000. But do me a favor, give $5,000 to yeshivas, whatever." Could he do that? So is that considered doing business? The store is going to be very happy. So the chayra is not doing business. There's what to debate about that, but the pashas is not doing business. Why? Since this guy is not getting the $5,000, it's going somewhere else, he's not gaining from it. It would be allowed. Though this is somewhat debatable. And once again, I think it would be a problem if he tells that yeshivas, whatever, I just got you the $5,000 donation. But if that yeshiva has no idea where it came from, l'chayra would be allowed. Now, what's considered doing business and what's considered in this damnu could be tricky. Now, the Taz has what's seemingly a big heter. He says you could buy a farm, and as a package deal, even though on the farm there are pigs, you could take those pigs and feed your workers with those pigs. That would not be a problem. Now, based on this, the Aruch HaShulchan says you're allowed to do a business that the Aruch HaShulchan takes even one step further. You could do a business that the ikr is kosher business, and the tuffle is dealing in treif food. That would be allowed. So you could produce leather and sell off the meat as part of your planned business is selling off the meat. So you buy animals, you take the skin, you make it into leather, if that's the primary. If they're both primary, it's going to be a problem. But if your primary business is making leather and you just happen to be selling off the meat, according to the Aruch HaShulchan, that would be allowed. Ramosha Feinstein was not very pleased with this Aruch HaShulchan, and he said, "Lemaisa, you're doing business with the treif," and he wasn't very happy. Ramosha Feinstein said, "Do not rely on the Aruch HaShulchan," and this is one of our chumros of Ramosha. Fine. I heard a story of somebody was a banana farmer. Now, he was not really a banana farmer. It was in some far-out country that he never even visited with his own eyes. But he bought a significant shiur in a banana farm, which they were cutting up the bananas and dehydrating them to make banana chips. Now, what did they do with the peels? So it's a chaval, bal tashchas on the peels. So what they were doing on the banana farm is they were buying some skinny pigs and fattening them up with these banana peels and then selling off fat pigs for a profit. Now, he only found out about this later. The question is this a problem? And based on the Marshag, he got a heter that this is allowed because, once again, the Iker business, and it's really the Aruch HaShulchan as well, the Iker business was the banana farming. The fattening of the pigs was just tuffle, and that would be allowed. Lamais, I'm pretty sure Moshe Feinstein would not be okay with this. The Darchei Tshuva said, like Reb Moshe, it would only work if it's a package deal. He didn't like the Aruch HaShulchan's tuffle. Tuffle isn't enough; it has to be a package deal. The Minchas Yitzchak and the Avnezer are machmer. This is an old shayla. Can the general store, they used to have a general store. It sold mostly Jewish products, but they want to take some non-kosher products just so it would be worthwhile for the goy to shop in the store. Can they sell some basic goy treif products so the goy will go into the store? So the Aruch HaShulchan is Mohammed Schus on those that do it, because l'meis it's a tough part of your business. I think it's clear Moshe Feinstein would not be very happy with this. Can one be a chef for treif food? So generally, there's going to be an issue of bas b'chalav, and it's going to be a non-starter anyways. But let's say we could get around the bas b'chalav issues. He wants to flip burgers by Burger King. And they only put the cheese on after the burgers are finished, and that's somebody else's job. Can he flip burgers at Burger King? So assuming he could avoid any bas b'chalav, so the Chassam Sofer would still say it's aser because the tam that you'll come to eat still applies. Rav Ezra Atiyah, he brings a proof from a Mishnah in Trumos that there's a machlekes whether workers that aren't allowed to eat the truma are they allowed to work in picking in it, and that was in that case without getting too involved. I was talking about the Rabbanan. So he says there's only machlekes by the Rabbanan. Diak by the Reisa, everybody agrees that that you're not allowed to, and it's a bad idea. Okay, now, so it seems like you that should not be allowed. The Meister Ravadi was in Suffolk whether or not you're allowed to be a chef for a treif restaurant. Okay, what about this? Is now we're getting to stuff that's much more negea. Can you pay for a treif meal? You take a client out for dinner. You take a Diet Coke, and you want to give him some treif food. Is that allowed? So the answer is no, it's not allowed. You're doing business with treif food. You're buying food for the purpose of business. And the poskim say that would not be allowed. Now, can you buy for your worker treif food? So the Mechaber says that you can't do business with treif food. Comes on the Ramah, and he adds, you're not even allowed to buy treif food to feed your workers. No, you can't. Now the Shach, before I get to the Shach, the Gra and the Taz explain, well, what's the business? What business am I doing? So the Gra and Taz explain, we're talking about a case where you're mechuyev to feed your workers. Now, if you're mechuyev to feed your workers, the base thing that you're supposed to pay is for the kosher food. That's what you would normally feed people, right? Now that you're spending less and buying treif, that's considered doing business with treif, because by buying the treif, you are saving money, and that's considered doing business, and that's Pshat in the Ramah. Comes along the Shach and says, I don't know where the Ramah got this from. L'maisa, you're not actually doing business with the treif food when you're feeding your workers. When you feed your dog nevela food, are you allowed to? Yeah. You're not doing business. So you're feeding your workers. You're not doing business. And furthermore, the minhag Yisrael for a gazillion years has been that you're allowed to feed your workers non-kosher food. Now, there's two ways of reading and understanding the Shach. Some understand the Shach that the Shach is arguing on the Ramah. Some understand the Shach that he is asking on the Ramah, but L'maisa he's agreeing with the Ramah. La'alach at the end of the day, the Vel takes on that the Shach is arguing on the Ramah. Now, fine. The Maisa in this Shayla, the Kitzer is Machmer. The Aruch HaShulchan says the minig is that you could buy for your workers. It's not Aser. There's no such Isner. The Chacham Shlomo and the Pri Chadash are also Mekel. So the Maisa, it seems like the Iker minig seems like it's to be Mekel. Now that's all talking about when you have a responsibility to feed your workers. But what if, the Olam is doing well, the office is doing great, I want to treat the Olam to some burgers from Burger King. Would that be allowed? No. Even the Shach and the Chachmas Adam and the Pri Chadash and whatever, and the Chacham Shlomo, they would not be Mekel when you're doing extra above what your requirements are, because that's doing business with treif food. What about, could you buy treif food for the Goyish holiday party? So I think that would be, according to Ramah, that would always be a problem. That would be a problem straight up. What about according to the Mekilim, the Aruch HaShulchan, for example, that allows buying for your food? Would the employer be allowed to buy for the Goyish holiday meal? So the buy treif for the holiday party. So it kind of depends. If it's the type of thing that in the office this is needed, you have a responsibility and a achrayas, and they would have tainas on you if you wouldn't provide such a holiday party, then you could, if you're the Aruch HaShulchan and friends would allow it. But if it's something that you don't really have to do, you're just trying to be an extra good guy in doing, then that would not be allowed. Now, is there an eitzah? What could you do? So one thing is you give money to the guy, and the guy could go and buy it on his own right. Now, not every employer likes this idea. They want their employees to actually spend the money and eat a good lunch. They might not want them to just pocket the money. But once again, if you give the employee the actual cash, that would work. Another way that you could do it is that the employees could rack up a bill at the Goyish restaurant, and then I could go and pay the bill. Oh, how much do my guys eat this month? $1,000? Okay, at the end of the month, I pay $1,000. Why would this be allowed? The reason why this would be allowed is because I am not buying them the food. They are, so to speak, buying the food, and I'm just coming later and paying for it. I have a bill that I'm paying, a debt to pay, but I didn't actively buy the food. It was never owned by me. But Rabbi say, don't be confused, because if you go the opposite way around and you prepay, you put $1,000 credit into the store. I prepaid $1,000 at the Burger King around the block. That would be a problem. Why? Because each time the guy comes and gets his burger, it's taken off my tab, my credit. If it's taken off my credit, then I am actually the one who is paying for it. What about gift cards? Can you give the guy, his employee, a gift card? So, what is a gift card? Does a gift card have value, or does it just inform the store that you have a credit? Once again, if it has value, so you're giving him this thing of value and you give him treif, he's going to buy on his own right. If you're just informing the store, you swipe this so the store knows about your credit, it's just like the case before that I said credit, and it's a problem. Some are machmer. I heard from Kals that he wanted to be mekel. I think we should be able to be mekel. Why did I think so? Because there's a whole marketplace of gift cards. You go online and you could buy and sell gift cards. I actually think there was a guy in the Mirror a couple of years ago who started this company and made like $50 million on it or something like that. A young guy that there's a whole industry out there, which I think was started by this guy, or definitely he became big in it, of buying and selling gift cards. And once you could buy and sell gift cards, it's like a currency or at least a commodity. And once it's like a currency or at least a commodity, therefore giving it over should be fine. That should not be a issue. Okay, let's go weiter. Can one buy shares in a company that sells treif? And by the way, there's also going to be other issues with these companies, Shabbos, Ribis, Bas B'Cholov, etc. So the Mesa, this is in stocks. Can one buy stocks? Every stock, it's not just McDonald's. Every stock that you buy is buying and selling a little treif, is open on Shabbos, is involved in ribbis, can one buy shares in such a company? So the Kitzer says you're a partner, it's a problem. By the initial days of the earliest days of stocks, so to speak. It wasn't the same thing as today, but similar. The Shalom Meshiv told the Kitzer, no, you're wrong. You don't understand the Metzias. You got the Metzias wrong. Really, what's going on is you're just lending the money to the company. And when the company goes up in value, you're getting money back. Now, the problem is that the Kitzer sounds more correct about what the Kitzer sounds more correct about what the actual way of stocks works. The actual ways that stocks works is you actually do have ownership. Tzarchin. Now, someone will say, since you don't have any decision-making rights, that's not considered ownership. However, it's also not so simple because you do have some decision-making rights. It happens to be, it's true that if you're a very small percentage, which most people are, that decision-making rights has very little value. But at the end of the day, if you have decision-making rights, that should make a difference. So one could argue. But Lamaisa, the Paiskim are makel by stocks. The minig is to be makel, that one could own stocks. However, if one has a significant share, then that would be not nearly as pashut. Okay, let's keep on going. There's a famous story that surfaced a couple of years ago of Shlomo Yehuda Rechnitz. He was at a airport in Ireland, and he saw there was 400 U.S. soldiers, and their flight was delayed, and they didn't have any proper food there. And Shlomo Yehuda Rechnitz went over to the commander, or whoever was in charge, and said, "Can I hook up the boys? I want to give them $50 each for a meal at the airport by the restaurant." And the commander allowed, and he paid for these 400 soldiers $50 apiece, $20,000 to give them a good geschmack meal. Gewaldik, Kiddush Hashem. And it went into all the news stations, reported about it. It was a big hack. It seemingly was a Kiddush Hashem. These soldiers today, because of that, they're probably not saying free Palestine. They're probably saying Israel has the right to defend themselves because Mr. Rechnitz bought them a burger 5 years ago. So the Mesa, it's good for the Jews. However, is it? Maybe there's two potential isurim that Mr. Rechnitz might have been over. Was Shlomo Yehuda over these isurim? One isur potentially is you're not allowed to give a gift to a guy. However, that's not really a problem because when it's makoim in the situation of having a Kiddush Hashem, you're allowed to give a present to a guy. So that's going to be okay. What about this thing? You can't buy and sell and buy and, you can't give, we just said you can't give your buy for your business acquaintance or your employees or whatever. You can't buy and do business with non-kosher items. Now, this was the airport in Ireland. I'm sure that food wasn't kosher. So was Shlomo Yehuda Rechnitz allowed to do this? So the chayre, he was allowed to. Why? Because business is when you buy and you make money or you get something in return for it. Over here, he bought the food for all these soldiers and he didn't get something back for it. What did he get back? I mean, there was a Kiddush Hashem created. The soldiers didn't give him a Kiddush Hashem. He didn't get back the Kiddush Hashem for putting down that money. He put down that money and a Kiddush Hashem was created. And l'chayr, it's not considered a business. If it's okay if any of them bought basar chalav, I don't know, that's a little bit more complicated. I'm not sure. I'm putting that aside right now. But for general non-kosher, that would be okay. L'chayra. Fine. Now, talking about Rechnitz, let's talk about what's the biggest issue in the sugya. The biggest issue in the sugya is the issue of nursing homes. Why is that the issue? Because what are you doing when you have a nursing home? What's the business? You're getting money from these people and the government in order for you to provide them a place to sleep, food to eat, and their basic medical needs taken care of, and some entertainment. That's what a nursing home is. So one of the primary things that you're providing is food. So if we're talking about a non-Jewish nursing home, right? So if you're providing them their treif food, it's a problem. You're doing business with treif food. You're buying the treif food. You're making the treif food. You're giving it over to these people. They're giving you money for it. It's pretty much a restaurant. The chayra, it should be a problem. And the Meiser of Elyashiv therefore said that one cannot own a nursing home. This is, however, not the accepted psak. As we know, lots of people in Klal Yisrael own nursing homes. So what can one possibly do to avoid the Isser? So one option is, guys, we're going completely kosher. That's one option. Okay. The problem is it's very expensive. So it's not so pashut. Next option, I heard that there's some people that do this. They'll take their nursing homes and they'll buy the stuff from the Jewish slaughterhouse that doesn't qualify, which a lot of that stuff is just a suffix, or whether it's a lot of stuff as Isuri Durabanan, and they'll be able to buy that stuff from a very cheap rate, and they'll use that stuff for their nursing home. Okay, maybe that could work as well, because once again we said these halachas do not apply by Isuri Durabanan. Another option is to outsource the food supply. There are companies that they'll run the food of the nursing home. And once again, this works very well. These companies exist, and it's a real deal. It's not some fake deal. It's a real deal. They're really taking care of the food. You pay them money, they take care of the food. And it's not a problem. Once again, if they would decide to use kosher food, let them decide to use kosher food. If they decide to use treif food, let them use treif food. I'm paying money, just like when I paid my worker money and he bought treif food. That was okay. I'm paying the service money. They're buying treif food. That would be okay. And feed the non-Jewish residents, that would be allowed. Now, what about the fact that you're going to they're just dropping off the food, but you're going to actually feed? And by the way, this is a proper sales. I'm just going to contrast things later. These companies, they have licenses to be able to do this. And they take responsibility, meaning they know about Mr. Jackson's allergies to this and Mr. Gonzalez's allergies to that. They know about that. And since they know about those things, therefore, they're really controlling the food. And that would be okay. Now, it's true that your nursing home staff is going to have to actually feed the food to the residents. However, the Isser of Schayra is only when you own it. The Isser of Schayra is not feeding. Okay, fine. So that Eitzah is a nice Eitzah. And by the way, there's a big shayla which I'm going to be alluding to a little bit here and there, and then I'll discuss at the end of Lifnei Iver. One thing that we're going to be working to avoid is the Isser of doing business with non-kosher food. One thing that is much more complicated to avoid is what if, when you have a nursing home with 300 residents, and especially if it's in an area where they're primarily white people. So you are most likely to have a couple of non-religious Jewish people there. And if you're going to have non-religious Jewish people as residents, how could you feed them treif food? That's what greater lifnei iver is there than feeding this old person in a nursing home treif food? So that's going to be a big issue. And doing this eitz of outsourcing the food supply will not help for the lifnei iver issue. It will help for the schayra, the business with treif food issue, but it will not help for the lifnei iver issue. Okay, now that Eitzah works well for the guys that own 1, 2, 3 nursing homes. Beseder, a lot of times it works financially very well to outsource the food supply. But what about the guys that own 20, 30, and more nursing homes? Now, for them, there's a greater profit margin if they're able to do the food in-house. Since anyways, they could buy in bulk. Therefore, when they do it in-house, there's a greater profit margin than by outsourcing it. And they don't want to outsource it. Is there an eitzah for those guys? So one eitzah is that somebody could sell his nursing home to a guy, or what often happens is he still remains the owner, and he leases out the nursing home to the guy, And now it's the guy's nursing home that is feeding these residents the non-kosher food. Now, there are two ways of doing this sell to a guy. One way is when you sell it to the Hispanic maintenance staff worker. You know, some guy, he's this Hispanic guy named Pedro, who's a trusted maintenance worker who makes $50,000 a year in the nursing home, and you sell him the nursing home. Now Pedro, who's now the owner of the nursing home, or he's leasing the nursing home, he receives 0.0001% of the profits of the nursing home. This arrangement, I would say, this isn't cool. Not cool. I don't like it. Because this is harama nikeres. Come on! Give me a break. This is a load of, come on, this is baloney. Give me a break. Not kosher baloney. This is harama nikeres. Pedro doesn't own the nursing home. The whole deal doesn't make sense. He's the owner of the nursing home. He gets paid nothing for it, and he has no responsibilities. He doesn't make any decisions. Come on. Oh, I know what you're thinking. Oh, we allow mechira by chametz, so why can't we allow it here? Chametz is very different. First of all, chametz we do bittul, and therefore owning chametz post bittul is a max derabanan. So whereas over here we're dealing with deraisa. By chametz, if the guy decides, you know what, I want to take the chametz, and I'm going to make the final payment, make a big payment, and take the chametz, we would say gesundheit. Over here, if Pedro would tell you, Lemaisa, I want to be the full owner of the nursing home, you wouldn't let him. I don't care, even if he would come up with money. You know, people will die, you'll get sued. Pedro doesn't have a license. It's not happening. Pedro cannot take over the nursing home. It's not happening. When you sell your chametz over Pesach, you have nothing to do with it. It's strange over here. You sold the nursing home, but every single day, day and night, you're busy working with the nursing home. You never stop dealing with the nursing home, even though you sold it to Pedro. Sounds kind of strange. And furthermore, Pedro can't own a nursing home. Pedro doesn't have a license to own a nursing home. And even if Pedro wanted to get a license, he couldn't get one. Either he couldn't pass the test, or he's a legal immigrant or something. He won't be able to get a nursing home license. So that is a very shvach sale. It's haram and nikeres, but Pasha says it doesn't work. Okay, next option is, instead of selling it to Pedro, what you do is you sell it to Mike, the nursing home administrator. Or you sell it to Tom, the guy who's in charge of everything to do with food in the nursing home. He runs the whole food operation in the nursing home. You sell it to Mike or Tom. Now, even though it's true they may not be licensed to be a full-fledged owner of the nursing home, however, they're licensed to be a nursing home administrator, or I'm not sure if there's a license needed to be in charge of the food, but they're a responsible person, and they know how to run the nursing home, and they're making many of the day-to-day decisions. And since that they have responsibility, they're making the day-to-day decisions, and they even get paid more. They're making $150 a year, not $50, because they have more responsibilities. So then the sale makes more sense. However, it's still not so pashut. Let's say, one day Mike would say, yes, Mr. Friedman, yes, Mr. Lieber, I see that I was overheard you guys, the Jewish guys, hawking about that Lifnei Iver Shayla. I don't want to be involved in such a Shayla of feeding non-kosher to Jewish residents. So I, being the owner of at least the foods part of the nursing home, or the entire nursing home, however exactly structured, me, Mike, as a devout Christian, I am deciding that from now on we're only buying kosher food. Now, what would the owner of this, Mr. Friedman, the owner of this nursing home, say? You think he would be okay with that? No. He would say, whoa, wait a second. No, we're not spending extra $300,000 a year on kosher food. What are you talking about? You'd have to come up with a different eitzah. And he would say, no, Mike, sorry, I'm using that clause in the contract where you're no longer the owner. We're going to pass it on to somebody else. Because so you see, Mike's not a real owner, so therefore it's still not very pashut. Okay, but once again, there is something to it. It's not absolutely a problem. Now, what about the Lifnei Iver Sheila? Because the Lifnei Iver Sheila is a big Sheila. You have a Jewish guy in your nursing home. And once again, it's bound to happen. You have 300 people in this 300 residents, and it's bound to happen that you're going to get a Jew here and there, especially if it's like tri-state area. So what are you going to do? So you can't feed him treif. Lifnei Iver, you're going to hand him treif? So what are you going to do? So does selling it to a guy help? No. I don't need to own the non-kosher food for it to be Lifnei Iver. If I tell my employees, feed the food to Mr. Goldstein, right? Mr. Goldstein wants supper. Feed him his supper. And the supper is treif. So that's going to be Lifnei Iver. I don't need to own it for it to be Lifnei Iver. Now, what about if you sell the food service section to Mike or Tom? You sell to Mike or Tom that they're in charge of the food service. And it's really their responsibility to feed Mr. Goldstein. It's not my responsibility to feed Mr. Goldstein. And Mike and Tom are on top of feeding Mr. Goldstein. So I guess it's okay. L'maisa, the whole thing doesn't sound hashkafically so geschmack. You are feeding 3 times a day this Jewish guy treif food. You found a loophole to make it work, but it still does not sound so geschmack. Another possible way of allowing it is you could offer a kosher meal, right? You offer a kosher option, and when Mr. Goldstein's signing up for the nursing home, you say, Mr. Goldstein, you're Jewish, and he says, yeah. So okay, great. We could set you up with kosher food. Now a lot of times Mr. Goldstein is going to say, I don't want kosher food. I haven't kept kosher my whole life. I'm not interested. Give me what everybody else gets. So at this point, would it still be Lifnei Iver? So one could argue that it's no longer Lifnei Iver, it's Messiah. Since Mr. Goldstein, he could have gone to any other nursing home that's owned by a non-Jew. He didn't have to go to my nursing home. So I'm not the only one to create a possibility of getting non-kosher food. He could have got it anywhere. And in fact, I even offered him kosher food. So maybe it's down to Messiah. It's helping. But I'm not the only one who created this possibility. And once it's Messiah, we can rely on, there's a shach that says the Isser of Messiah, this Rabbanan Messiah, helping out somebody to do a Isser, only applies when there's a din d'oraisa of techacha. And by a mumar, or even by a tinuk shenishba, there's no din techacha, because it won't help. And once there's no din of techacha, there'd be no Isser Messiah, and Messiah Dvar Aveira, and therefore you could actually give him the non-kosher food. However, there's not so pashut, because one could argue that's true before he came to the nursing home. He could have gone anywhere else. But now that he's at the nursing home, he has no possibility of getting other food. So now you're going and giving him, the only way he has to get the non-kosher food is by your worker giving it to him. And by you telling your worker to give it to him, it's a problem. So the Maisa, the heter is not so pashut. Not so pashut at all. It's also like, at the end of the day, you're feeding a Jew not kosher, so it's not geschmack. At the end of the day, you should try to convince him to take the kosher. If he doesn't take it, so there is another svara that the Maisa, you do your best. You try to downgrade it to Messiah. If we don't give them their non-kosher food and we don't feed these guys, or we force kosher food onto them, what's going to happen? The government's going to close down every Jewish nursing home. So what did you gain? Are we in a better situation? Maybe not. Like this, we could at least maybe try to convince them to eat kosher. And, after 120, we might be able to try to convince the family not to cremate him. It might be a good thing to have a Jewish ownership on this with some Jews around. And therefore, I guess the hashkafa that's around is we try to do our best to avoid the Isser, even though l'maisa, it's not very pashut. Thank you for listening, and have a great week.